Chapter 30. Lincoln on Leadership by Donald T. Phillips, 1992. In a nutshell, above all, leaders seek results. Many have wishes, but effective leaders act. There are now many books that extract leadership lessons from the lives of famous people. But this was one of the first. Phillips had the initial inspiration for it when, in the middle of a week-long management seminar, he realized that the ideas being presented had been enacted in real life by Abraham Lincoln. He was then amazed to discover that amid the thousands of articles and books written on Lincoln, there was very little on his leadership style. It seemed that Lincoln's very genius as a leader and his success as president had made him into a myth, obscuring the fact that his life before becoming president was unspectacular, and that whatever he knew about leading he had, like everyone else, learned. The unlikeliest hero. Lincoln was born in a log cabin in what was then frontier America. His mother died when he was young, and his father remarried. Fortunately, his stepmother encouraged him to read. With a minimal education, he went on to try his hand at a number of jobs, including clerk, store owner, surveyor, and postmaster, before becoming a lawyer. Though not particularly successful in his early political career, his views on slavery in the Lincoln-Douglas debates brought him wide attention, and at the 1860 Republican Convention, he won the party's nomination for the presidency. Lincoln's election to the White House was not exactly an accident, but he was greatly helped by the fact that the Democrats were split between North and South. Within the Republican Party, Lincoln had only been selected over William Seward because he was considered the more middle-of-the-road candidate. By the time he was sworn in, 7 states had broken away from the Union on the slavery issue, yet the outgoing President, Buchanan, had given up trying to control the situation. Congress, through the Union Army, was in disarray and underfunded, was looking to cut its costs. And only Lincoln seemed to see that action had to be taken if the Union was to survive and be rid of slavery. Decisive and ceaselessly energetic, his determination surprised everyone. He made William Seward his Republican rival, Secretary of State, and Edwin Stanton his Secretary of War. While neither man thought much of him, within a relatively short space of time, both would change their minds. Phillips presents us with the amazing fact that Lincoln had never held an executive position before becoming president, yet he proceeded to a total reorganization of the U.S. military and a constitutionally questionable expansion of the powers of the presidency itself. Let's look in more detail at some of the points that Phillips makes about Lincoln as president. The active leader. Lincoln knew that the White House was an ivory tower and spent most of his time out of the office, visiting troops in the field, visiting his staff in their homes, visiting the wounded in hospital, holding cabinet meetings wherever it was convenient. He prized informality and human contact. Lincoln employed what is now known as MBWA, management by wandering around. He sacked one general for isolating himself from his men, and believed that the best information was found at first hand. He took charge of battle situations himself when necessary, and remains one of the only U.S. presidents literally to come under fire. The most accessible U.S. president in history, Lincoln rarely turned anyone away who came to see him, whether top general or lowly farmer. This, and his great ability as a listener, helped build trust in him as a leader. The scholar of human nature. Lincoln had a penetrating comprehension of human nature. Phillips writes, which allowed him to take the broad and compassionate view. He was able to forgive mistakes easily and was notorious for his many pardons, particularly of war deserters, who normally would have hanged. Phillips believes that this compassion evoked trust and loyalty, which in a time of war are absolutely crucial to success. The president used persuasion, not coercion, to achieve his ends, and was fond of the maxim, "A drop of honey catches more flies than a gallon of gall." Only if you could convince someone that you were their friend could you really influence them. Despite periods of depression, Lincoln never underestimated the power of a pleasing personality and was always ready to compliment or encourage. He rarely lost his temper. In terms of managing his own generals, Lincoln wasn't afraid to let them know what he thought were their bad points, yet he also gave them free rein to perform. Many did not meet his expectations and were given lesser responsibilities, but when the man did come along who could act in the way he wanted, Ulysses S. Grant, he placed the entire U.S. Army under his command. Honest and Compassionate Abe. The nickname Honest Abe was accurate. Lincoln's reputation for honesty made people trust him and increased his ability to lead. Top leaders are expected to do the right thing, and he had this attribute in abundance. Values motivate, Phillips notes. Lincoln sought objectivity. I shall do nothing in malice. What I deal with is too vast for malicious dealing. He didn't have time for retribution, pettiness, or blame. Although he frequently wrote angry letters to his generals who were not doing enough to defeat the Confederate army, he never sent them. To do so would have made enemies, and he was always keen to give people another chance, while some perceived this as weakness. His willingness to overlook mistakes and hold his tongue endeared Lincoln to his staff. When the Civil War ended in 1865, Lincoln didn't seek revenge on the South, instead offering goodwill. In his second inaugural address, he spoke the famous words, "With malice towards none, with charity towards all, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds." This large view of things helped the South to get on with rebuilding the country without fear, minimizing both guilt and blame. The Great Communicator. Lincoln was a brilliant writer, but also a remarkable orator. With his high-pitched voice, strange gangly frame, and ill-tailored clothes, he didn't make good first impressions. But by the end of a talk, his audiences were usually rapt. He enjoyed injecting anecdotes, stories, and jokes into his speeches because he preferred them not to be too high-minded. He wanted them to appeal to the average person. The same man, with very little schooling, was able to write the almost poetic Gettysburg Address, not to mention thousands of superbly crafted letters. Lincoln's lesson is that every investment we make in increasing our communication skills pays off. The unmovable. Lincoln was a master of overcoming setbacks and defeats because he was supported by the belief that he had right on his side. His assertiveness and refusal to buckle under pressure made him the target of unjust criticism, slander, and abuse, and until he could demonstrate himself in office, he was rejected out of hand as a hick country lawyer. Yet he didn't often attack his detractors, and in fact accepted criticism as part of the job, only worrying when the criticism might affect perception of the Union war effort. He found release in humor and storytelling, both to amuse others and to get him through the dark years of the war. Final comments. What is remarkable about Lincoln, Phillips notes, is that he actually did what he said he would in terms of preserving the Union and abolishing slavery. This wasn't good luck. He had goals for his time in office, and he accomplished them relatively quickly, within 4 years. Though always ready to admit he was wrong, he was massively confident about the stance he'd taken, and with this certainty of purpose came decisiveness. Lincoln on Leadership is worth reading to appreciate the nuances of Lincoln's character and for the points that end each chapter, providing an easy reminder of his leadership lessons. It's an inspiring read because Lincoln himself inspired. He fulfilled the main criterion for a great leader that James MacGregor Burns discussed in his seminal work, Leadership. A person who can lift others into their better selves. Next time you find yourself in a quandary about how to deal with someone or how to cope with a crisis, ask yourself, what would Lincoln have done? Donald T. Phillips. Phillips has 20 years of business experience and now speaks widely on leadership. He's currently the mayor of Fairview, Texas. His other books include The Founding Fathers on Leadership, Martin Luther King, Jr. on Leadership, and On the Brink, The Life and Leadership of Norman Brinker.